Welcome back to all the viewers. Last episode we were in the middle of a video about Turkey's actions that could cause America to confront Libya, and the laptop unfortunately ran out of battery. I'll finish the video here. Last week, a feature by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton excoriating the political leadership of Syria appeared in the London-based Arabic language daily Ashaq al-Awsat, Saudi-supported and printed in 12 locations. It is considered to be among the most influential newspapers in the Arab world. As such, her comments in English and Arabic were intended to signal to Arab readers and the world at large that American position towards Damascus is becoming more stringent and confrontational, evoking Clinton's statements towards leadership of Ivory Coast and Libya early this year. Her characteristically imperious, contemptuous and inflammatory comments, indeed threats, included: in May 19th speech, President Obama echoed demonstrators' basic legitimate demands. President Assad, he said, could either lead that transition or get out of the way. It is increasingly clear that the President Assad has made his voice... Sorry, lost my spot here. Clear that President Assad has made his choice. President Assad is showing his true colors by embracing the repressive tactics of his ally Iran and putting Syria onto the path of a pariah state. By following Iran's lead, President Assad is placing himself and his resume in the wrong side of history. If President Assad believes he can act with impunity because the international community hopes for his cooperation on other issues, he is wrong about this as well. He and his resume are certainly not indispensable. The Wall Street Journal reported on June 18th that Washington administration is preparing a case against Syrian President Bashar Assad and other government officials at the International Criminal Court in Hague. The same newspaper feature added that the US is also exploring ways to more directly target Syria's oil and gas revenue. On June 14th, 4 members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, including the military alliance's 3 European powerhouses, Britain, France, Germany and Portugal, proposed a draft resolution in the United States Security Council aimed at Syria. 3 days later, in Berlin, German Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President Nicolas Sarkozy confirmed their governments would push for a new UN resolution targeting Syria. In Sarkozy's words, France, hand in hand with Germany, calls for tougher sanctions against Syrian authorities who are conducting intolerable and unacceptable actions against and repression against the population. The USS George H.W. Bush nuclear-powered supercarrier and its assigned carrier strike group and carrier air wing with 9,000 sailors, 70 aircraft and 4 guided missile destroyers and cruisers is in the Mediterranean Sea, not far from the Syrian coast. One of the destroyers, USS Truxtun, just left the Israeli port city of Haifa after a 2-day stopover. The USS Monterey guided missile cruiser is docked off the Georgian Black Sea city of Batumi currently and will re-enter the Mediterranean soon. Deployed as the first warship assigned to the US NATO Potential First Strike Pan-Europe Interceptor Missile System, it can launch Tomahawk cruise missiles as well as standard missiles, 3 interceptor missiles. The guided missile destroyer USS Bari left Gaeta, Italy. The guided missile destroyer USS Bari left Gaeta, Italy, where 9 other US warships have been stationed on June 17th after a 5-day port visit. USS Bari is part of the Bataan Amphibious Ready Group, headed by the amphibious assault ship USS Bataan, used at the beginning of the US-NATO Libyan campaign in March and currently in the Mediterranean. The Pentagon and its allies, every nation in the Mediterranean, is now a NATO member or partner except for Libya, Syria and Cyprus, and Lebanon, of course, have the military hardware in place for replication of the 95-day war against Libya directed at Syria. scores of warplanes on carriers and on bases in Italy, Greece, Cyprus and Turkey, and guided missile ships ready to launch Tomahawk missiles. On June 18th, Muslu, senior advisor to Turkish President Abdullah Gül, told the United Arab Emirates-based Al Arabiya television channel that Syria has less than a week to respond to what Reuters described as calls for change. Muslu's exact words were, "The demands in this field will be for a positive response for these issues within a short period that does not exceed a week. The opposite of this, it would not be possible to offer any cover for the leadership in Syria because there is the danger that we had always been afraid of, and this is foreign intervention," said he. Although the last sentence can be heard as either warning or threat, it is in fact the second. The statement as a whole is an ultimatum since the war against Libya was launched by US Africa Command under the codename Operation Odyssey Dawn to the present NATO-run Operation Unified Protector in place since March 31. Air operations have been run from NATO's Air Command headquarters for Southern Europe in Luzma, Turkey. Stock up with fresh food with eFoods Direct. In March, Turkey supplied 5 ships and a submarine for the blockade of Libya's coast, and on March 28, Hurriyet Daily News announced that Turkey was assuming control of Benghazi airport and sending naval forces to patrol the corridor between the rebel-held city and Crete. Quoting Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Turkey said yes to 3 tasks within NATO: the takeover of Benghazi airport for the delivery of humanitarian aid, the tasks about control of the air corridor and the involvement of Turkish naval forces in the corridor between Benghazi and Crete. In 2003, the US ambassador to NATO at the time, Nicholas Burns, stated in a testimony to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, NATO needs to pivot from its inward focus on Europe, which was necessary and appropriate during the Cold War, to an outward focus on the arc of countries where most of threats are today, in Central and South Asia and in the Middle East. NATO's mandate is still to defend Europe and North America, but we don't believe we can do that by sitting in West Europe or Central Europe or North America. We have to deploy our conceptual attention and our military forces east and south, said NATO's leader. NATO's future, he believes, is east and it is south. It's in Greater Middle East. Earlier this month, Turkish Defense Minister Vehdi Günal announced that Luzma will also be the new home of Alliance Land Force Command, consolidating and transferring ground forces currently stationed in Germany and Spain to Luzma Air Station. On June 17, Turkey took over command of Standing NATO Maritime Group 2, which, with Standing NATO Maritime Group 1, is part of a NATO response force and centers its activities in the Mediterranean. Each group consists of between 4 to 8 warships, destroyers and frigates, and since 2005 has expanded its missions through the Suez Canal and the Gulf of Aden and the Somali coast, circumnavigating the African continent in 2007 and traveling the length of the Atlantic coast of the US, then entering the Caribbean Sea the same year. The first time NATO had ever deployed the Caribbean, the NATO naval groups have also sailed Africa's Gulf of Guinea, the Persian Gulf and the Baltic Black Sea, among other locations, the Baltic Sea. Turkey hosted a conference of Syrian opposition forces called Change in Syria from May 1st to June 2nd in the city of Antalya. Although held under the sponsorship of the Egyptian-based National Organization of Human Rights, logistics and security were provided by the host country. Had Syria allowed a gathering of Turkish opposition groups whose express intention was the overthrow of the government in Ankara, one can only imagine the Turkish administration's reaction. On June 13th, Britain's The Guardian, since the Balkans crisis began in the early 1990s, never slowed to fan the flames of moral panic over humanitarian crisis. with techniques ranging from hyperbole to hysterics in order to alarm and neutralize its readership. In Acquaintance to Western Military Action ran an editorial titled "Syria Butchery, While the World Watches," which let the cat out of the bag regarding the prospect of US and NATO military intervention in Syria by stating, "Turkey, a member of NATO, can yet drag the West in. If it decides its own interests require action to defend its borders from the Syrian refugees, the world would then pay a high price indeed for having pretended that Assad was somebody else's problem." On June 19th, the major Turkish daily newspaper Zaman quoted Veysel to the rationale for NATO's first military action 16 years ago. "Remember when NATO was accused by the international media and public of not being able to prevent 8,000 Muslim Bosnians from being murdered in front of the world's eyes? Well, as a member of NATO and a country whose border is about to witness such a massacre by the Syrian army, Turkey will not allow such a thing to happen again, especially before its own eyes." Last week, Turkey's President Erdogan and Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoglu were reported to have toughened demands on Syria in meeting with President Assad's special envoy Hassan Turkmani in Ankara. And on January 18th, El Arabia reported that Ankara had dispatched an envoy to Damascus to demand that Assad's brother Mahar relinquish his command of the Republican Guard and the 4th Armored Division. Zaman recently cited what was identified as a pro-government Syrian official saying to the United Arab Emirates-based daily The International, "The West wants to put the region under Turkish control like in the Ottoman days. Turkey is a NATO member and embodies a safe kind of Islam for the West. So they have done a deal to give everything to Ankara. Should a conflict erupt between Turkey and Syria on their border, NATO will be obligated under its Article 5 collective military assistance hostiles against Syria. Nothing else could be devised in that scenario." In February of 2003, on the eve of the US, the British invasion of Iraq, in NATO's words, "Turkey requested NATO assistance under Article 4 of the North Atlantic Treaty. NATO's integrated air defense system in Turkey was put on full alert and augmented with equipment personnel from other NATO commanding countries." That's all for now. Thanks for listening to Raleigh's 2012 updates. Have a great day.